Hello everyone, welcome back to another card combo show with me, Chocobilly. This week we are looking at the Warrior of Light from Opus 23. So, here's a 4 CP 8K Earth forward with the text, when Warrior of Light enters the field, you may search for 2 job standard unit and put them into the break zone. At the beginning of the attack phase, during each of your turns, you may pay X. When you do so, choose one job standard unit of cost X in your break zone, play it onto the field, and then at damage 3, Warrior of Light gains plus 1000 power. So, a few things to note here. When he enters the field, you can only search 2 standard units. So they have to be 2. You can't search 1. You can search none by failing the search, but you can't search 1. You have to search 2. And they have to go to the break zone. You can't put one on the break zone, one to hand, or both to hand. They both have to go to the break zone. And then obviously at the beginning of your attack phase, during each of your turns, you may pay X. When you do so, choose on job standard unit, plus X in the break zone, play it on the field. So it's one of those cards which creates another auto ability once the payment has been paid. So you pay 2 CP, your opponent can then respond 1 by Amaterasing. So obviously then killing Warrior of Light, provided you don't damage 3, and cancelling his effect, even though you've paid the 2. Or by removing your selection of forward in the, or selection of standard unit in the break zone, so Edward, something along those lines. So yeah, unfortunately it is quite vulnerable to all these effects, but early game, I think this card is actually quite good, because your opponent's either forced to answer it quickly, which means that they won't be using backups probably, so that at least you're attacking their hand to a certain degree, and then at least at damage 3 he does also have the plus 1000 power as well, so it means that if he is Amaterased once, hopefully he won't die. Anyway, so yeah, Ursula, obviously a really good card. Warrior of Light in general has some incredible, that's being a bit hyperbolic, has some really good combos and a huge amount of cards that he works well with. So I'm going to be going over cards that work well with standard units as well as himself, but also then just some interesting standard units as well. So Ursula, obviously she comes onto the field, she plays a monk of 2 CP or less from your break zone onto the field, and then obviously Warrior of Light can keep on playing things back onto the field as well. So it means that with Ursula, you can keep on breaking monks, putting them into the break zone, and then Warrior of Light to recur them back onto the field. So that works quite nicely. So you've got the 3 CP monk. When it enters the field, choose a monk and a 40 opponent controls, and they deal damage to each other equal to their power. So you could put monk into the break zone to buff Ursula. You could then go to combat, play monk onto the field through Warrior of Light, and then choose Ursula and another forward, and they fight each other. And then you could also put monk back into the break zone to then either buff Ursula again, or to choose another forward and deal damage equal to Ursula's power. So you could basically be taking out 2 things for 9k. Then we've got this monk, works really, really nice with just backups in general, I guess, because this monk looks at a monk in your break zone and adds it back to your hand. So you could early game play monk onto the field, get back a monk, and then play that. So Warrior of Light obviously targeting that this monk gets you another one back. And again, sacking this monk off with Ursula to deal something damage, buff Ursula, whatever, and then being able to go to combat, pay 3, play it back onto the field, get something back to your hand, means that it's recurring the cost of itself that you're playing through Warrior of Light as well. And then we have the new Opus 23 Monk. So when it enters the field, choose a forward, deal at 4k damage. If you control 5 more backups, deal at 8k damage. So chances are it won't be dealing the 8k, might do, which would be quite nice, for only 2 CP is really, really good. And Warrior of Light does really help with getting those backups quickly, because even if you're discarding for a backup, provided the card you discard is obviously a standard unit, playing it back onto the field is really, really good. But yeah, playing this into the field, deal something 4k, and then sacking it off to then deal 4k to something, or sorry, damage equal to Ursula's power is really good, or just buffing Ursula. You know, there's loads of different combos here. But the really good thing about Warrior Light as well is that it doesn't matter the element you pay for his auto ability, just so long as the cost is correct. So you can pay 2 Earth CP, monk still comes onto the field even though it's a fire. Lunith. So yeah, obviously all your standard units gain haste, all your standard unit forwards, sorry, gain haste. So focusing on a deck which just kind of poops out a lot of standard unit forwards would be quite nice. So Vikings. Now obviously this is Earth, Fire, Water, which is perfectly fine to be honest with you. Water has the fire generating Moogle, Earth is Earth, and to be honest these 3 elements go perfectly fine together anyway. The one thing is Vikings really likes to be kind of just Vikings, so you may not want to focus too much on the Earth or the Fire, but regardless, being able to replay your Vikings from your break zone back onto the field. So you know, hypothetically, you can play this Viking onto the field from your hand, not hit anything, let it die for whatever reason, then replay it at your next attack phase to hopefully keep on hitting Vikings. And this would be the sort of build where you want all of your standard unit Vikings, so maybe focusing a little bit less on BK and Faris. I mean, obviously still want those cards in there as well, but you need to make room for Warrior of Light and Luneth. And if you're doing 3 copies of all 4 Vikings, you're already 12 forwards deep, right? So you need to be quite cautious of how you play it. But regardless, being able to search, or is it Faris searches, or is it Leia? Play Leia, I think. She searches a Viking, yeah, or pirate, and then playing Faris, and then free casting BK, and then going to combat, playing this Viking from your break zone to then play a Viking, to play a Viking, to play a Viking. You know, that'd be quite funny. And if all those Vikings have haste, or all those standard unit Vikings have haste, that's not too bad. But regardless, Vikings I think are just kind of fun with Warrior Light anyway. Haven't tested it, but I'd like to try it. Cyan, so again, obviously in the right element this time with Luneth, but being able to play just all these standard units, samurais onto the field. You've got plenty of samurai backups. You've got plenty of samurai forwards, and a lot of them are standard units as well. So be able to just go to combat, play something from your break zone onto the field. You know, you've also got samurai forwards that deal damage upon entry, so you have to pay additional payments for whatever. Deals 8k to something, and then has haste because of Luneth, it attacks. You deal 5k to something because you've got enough standard unit, enough samurai forwards or characters. Whatever. And yeah, so you have the option there of being able to go quite ham with that. But again, it's Warrior of Light kind of sits outside of that because it's Earth and Samurai wants to be mono fire. So maybe not amazing, but still an interesting kind of diversion for the combo. And then you got this Cyan as well. So when Cyan, a job samurai forward or a card name samurai forward enters the field, you get to choose a forward and deal at 9k. So play Cyan onto the field, go to combat, play play a samurai from your break zone onto the field, and, well, it has to be a samurai forward. Deal 9k to something, so, you know, that's not too bad. And if Cyan and Warrior of Light stay alive long enough, then you get to keep on doing that recursion and playing samurais onto the field and potentially killing things. And then Luneth, again, giving the standard units haste as well, could be quite good. Right, Soldier Candidate. So, obviously, all the new Soldier Candidates from this set work nicely with Warrior of Light, but I wanted to focus on the Fire one because of 2 things. It is a Fire forward, and it's a 7 forward. You can guess where I'm going with this. Zac, obviously. So, you play Soldier Candidate onto the field, that triggers both Zac's effects because it's Fire and 7, so you get to choose a forward and deal it 4k. And with Soldier Candidates being in the break zone, whatever, playing onto the field, that's quite nice because then you're getting a 4k ping when you go to attack phase. Obviously, if you have Angeal on the field, then all of a sudden you're dealing 8k to something. If you've got Jin or Lefty on the field, it's even more. So you can really pump up the damage that Zac's doing. And you don't... so there's the Soldier Candidate, and then I think it's Soldier First Class, Second Class. It's a 3 CP for 5k with First Strike, which searches another of itself, which can be quite fun. So, yeah, basically you've got lots of... Well, I say lots. You've got 2 options, but standard unit options for Fire, 7 forwards. That could be triggering Zac coming into the field from Warrior of Light, which would be great. And, you know, having Zac, Warrior of Light, and Angeal on the field at the same time isn't actually that unlikely. Angeal can search the Zac. You then play Warrior of Light, which then searches the Soldier. Go to combat, pay 2, play it onto the field. All of a sudden, you're dealing lots of damage to things. Could be quite fun. And again, you could put Luneth in there as well, because standard units. Chocobo Knight. So being able to play Chocobo Knights to search Chocobos would be quite fun. And it's just a job Chocobo or card name Chocobo, so actually that can get you backups as well. So it could be getting you your Choco Latte, or it could be getting you Fat Chocobo, whatever. But being able to play it onto the field from your break zone, because it's going to keep on dying, because ultimately it's got a really good dull effect, and your opponent's not going to let it stick around, so at least then you get to keep on searching when it comes back onto the field as well. Chocobo, Chocobo into Chocobo into Chocobo into Chocobo. So kind of like Vikings. And again, playing this from the break zone, it's great. Playing off of Chocobo Knight is great. The one sad thing about this is that the reason Vikings is better than Chocobos, and Vikings isn't good, but you see where I'm going with this, is that 1, it's had more recent support, but also 2, Chocobos play from hand generally, which means that you are relying on already having those cards. Now, obviously, you've got Chocobo and Izuna, and there are lots of cards that search Chocobos, but you have to have played those cards, which means you have CP down, so it's not nearly as efficient. It's not playing from the deck. You have like Fat Chocobo, which does, but nah. But when Chocobo enters the field, you may play one card named Chocobo from your hand onto the field. There's no cost restriction. So paying the 3 CP to just play it from your break zone to then play a bigger Chocobo onto the field would be quite fun. And generally, Chocobos do die pretty quickly. So, you know, maybe if Chocobo, or Chocobos, as I also realise I say that weirdly, I say Chocobo, it should be Chocobo, because they're based on a chocolate from like the 80s and 90s in Japan. Yeah. There's a fun fact for you. I think the reason it's a yellow bird is because that's what the icon for that chocolate, sorry, the mascot for that chocolate was in the 80s. But yeah, so technically it should be Chocobo, but Chocobo because, I don't know, I sound posh. Yeah, so being able to 3 CP Chocobo into Chocobo could be quite fun. And then obviously you got this Chocobo as well, so Chocobo into the haste giving Chocobo to then give maybe the Chocobo Knight haste, to then dull that, to then play another Chocobo. Yeah, there's lots of fun things you can do. Magus. Now, I know I like to go on my weird rants about, not rant, but like weird rabbit holes of stupid combos that are never going to be good. But hey, Magus can be played onto the field. One of the best things about Warrior of Light is the fact it can play backups. So, playing a backup like Magus from your break zone isn't the hardest to do, because let's say hypothetically, and very hypothetically, you have Adelard. Pay 2 CP. Double the next damage, or double, during the turn, if your ability deals damage to a forward, double the damage instead. And that discard could be the Magus. Then just pay 2 CP again, go to combat, provided Warrior of Light's effect can go off. Magus enters the field, deals 12k to your opponent's board because you've quadrupled the damage it deals. It deals 3, now 6, now 12. So, you know, that's not the worst thing in the world. Now, obviously, you would probably have to play Adelard that turn. I mean, the likelihood of both Adelard and Warrior Light being on the field is pretty slim. You then also need Magus to be either in the break zone or in your hand. So you have a few prerequisites for this. All whilst your opponent has at least some form of a board. So, yeah. But, if you can deal 12k to your opponent's board, which is quite funny. Sage. Honestly, this is just a fantastic little combo, because Warrior of Light to then search Sage and something else into the break zone, go to combat, pay 2 CP, get Sage onto the field, Warrior of Light then swings. That's just really good. And also kind of nice for Hythandless, so it might be that you have Hythe and Thingy on the field, and you just need to find your Sages. Maybe Warrior of Light is the better play that turn, because Sage can be then played onto the field when you go to combat. Blacksmith. Now this is a weird one, but I really like it, and again, only really applicable in certain situations, so probably only a one-off. But when Blacksmith enters the field, until the end of the turn, all the forwards you control gain when this forward attacks. Choose one forward opponent controls, deal it 7,000 damage. So if, let's say you're in a situation where both you and your opponent are a bit of a stalemate, both got a fair few forwards, you go to combat, you then play Blacksmith from your break zone, which your opponent just didn't know was in there, play it onto the field, give all your forwards the ability to deal 7k on attack. That's quite funny. Now, you could, theoretically, throw the new legend edge into this as well, so then all your forwards, all your lightning forwards or job ninja forwards would deal 7k plus 7k on attack, which is just ridiculous. But that's not going to happen, right? But ultimately, I think this is actually quite a fun card to play, because it doesn't get played ever, despite it actually being quite a good effect. But the reason it doesn't get ever played is because you always, if you're playing if you're playing backups in general, you generally want them really early, and Blacksmith is a very late game effect. So being able to just, I don't know, break a backup, go to combat, play Blacksmith onto the field, all my forwards now deal 7k on attack. That's not so bad. And if you do have stuff that also increases damage, so Leftia or Jin, I think that's only based on the fire forwards dealing damage, unfortunately. That's still quite funny though, because you're then dealing 8k, maybe 9k, maybe 10k, I don't know. But yeah, I just think Blacksmith is actually quite a fun card to run with Warrior Light. And it doesn't matter on the element either. It could just be, you could be Mono Earth and just Blacksmith, attack all these big forwards that are now dealing 7k on attack as well. Summoner. So, I really like this with like the little 1 CP Shiva summon, which if you remove 4 cards from your break zone, 4 ice cards from your break zone, you get to add it back to hand. So, you cast the Shiva, put Summoner into the break zone, go to combat, play Summoner back onto the field, cast Shiva again because you got it back to hand, and put some of them to the break zone again. So all of a sudden you've managed to dull 4 things out of the way, and you've broken the summoner twice, but you've paid 2 CP for it to get it back. So yeah, I just think that's a really, really cool little combo. Bear in mind that the summoner can only dull forwards, or dull and freeze forwards though, but the Shiva, I believe, can dull and freeze backups, so you could be, or characters, so you could freeze out a monster and backups, and then someone could be dulling out the forwards, so something fun there. Bard, so another weird backup that doesn't really ever get played because of the fact that it feels like such a late game card. That's where Warrior Light might be a bit more applicable. You just play, you say you're, I don't know, turn 6, 7, whatever. You play Warrior Light onto the field, you search the Bard and something else, you then go to combat, and then play Bard onto the field, dull all your opponent's backups. Those backups that they may be saving for something else, like in combat they were going to buff all their forwards, or they were going to nuke your forward when it attacks, or you AMI it, who knows, whatever. Ultimately, being able to Bard onto the field to then dull everything out of the way would be, or sorry, dull all your opponent's backups out of the way would be really funny, because it's just something that doesn't ever really get played, and it's not a bad ability if your opponent has the backups there. So again, it's one of those cards which are kind of like just a one-off, just sat in your break zone, waiting to be played. But again, unfortunately, the problem is that nothing ever stays in the break zone for long, especially with Irvine and Mist Dragon and all those sorts of cards. White Mage. So I think this is actually a really good card. So, or it's a good card, but a really good card with Warrior Light. So put it in the break zone. During this turn, if a forward you control is dealt damage by summon or an ability, the damage becomes 0 instead. So obviously, if it's still blocked by a forward of less power, it still takes that damage. So bear that in mind. But they can't finish it off with any summons or abilities, which is ultimately the best thing about it. And being able to just have White Mage sat around and then getting to use it at any point, and then go to combat, pay 1 CP, bring it back onto the field. 1 CP for something like this, a recursion effect like this, I think is really, really good. So yeah, I think this White Mage and Warrior of Light is genuinely, sorry, a good little package. Summoner, so you don't really want to be replaying Summoner too many times, but when it enters the field, search for 1 win summon, add it to your hand, which could be quite fun if you're getting yourself, I don't know, an Asura, and then you cast Asura, activate your backups, or activating forwards that otherwise couldn't attack. So, you know, maybe your Warrior of Light and something else have been frozen out, you go to combat, you pay 4, summon onto the field, to then get yourself an Asura, to then activate your forwards, something like that. You know, Chocobo, whatever. There's all these different options, but you don't want to keep on playing it because ultimately, 1, it's actually quite expensive for this, and whilst it does gain power when you cast summons, chances are it probably won't either stick around long enough, or it's just, yeah, won't get played because it's quite niche in its usage. But yeah, being able to just immediately search out a win summon when you need it, I think is actually a very good effect. So having it just kind of in the pocket, ready to go to combat, summon onto the field, search yourself, I remember the old 5 CP Diablo, something like that. Or the Alexander, potentially, to be... Is it Alexander? Yeah, which can... if a forward you would receive damage, choose your opponent's forward, it receives damage instead. Stuff like that, right? Animist. So ultimately a backup which has a good break effect and then a good entry effect. So pay 1, put Animist into the break zone, search for 1 monster of 2 or less and play onto the field, and damage 3. When it enters the field, you may search for 1 monster of 4 or less and add it to your hand. So you can search for a 2 CP, play onto the field, go to combat, bring Animus back onto the field, search yourself a 4 CP and add that to hand, ready for you to play in your main phase 2. So yeah, a really good effect, which technically, so long as Warrior of Light survives, you can keep on using that every turn, because obviously you play it back onto the field, the following turn, break Animus, search another 2 CP, play on the field, go to combat, pay 2 CP, bring it back onto the field, search another thing, and you'll be rinsing your deck of all your monsters, but actually that's not necessarily a bad thing if you've got a lot of monsters in the deck, and I just think it's a lot of fun. Summoner, not a great example, but to be honest, I was kind of lacking in lightning cards to throw in with Warrior of Light, and he got a lot of haste forwards and things like that are fairly cheap, but I wanted to focus on something a bit weird and different. So one of the reasons Summoner is bad is because when you look at the cost of a card, you always have to increase it by 2 CP, because ultimately it is a card from hand. So paying 3 CP, technically 5 CP, for something that then plays a 6-cost summon, and you have to wait a turn for it to then become active and break it, is not good at all. However, if it isn't technically a card from hand but a card from your break zone, so you go to combat, you pay 3 to then play it onto the field, and then the following turn you've just got that sat there ready to be able to cast a 6 CP summon, is actually pretty good in my opinion. It's still very slow because you have to wait a turn for it to be usable, but the same can be said of any forward, or sorry, any card that requires a dull to be able to be used, so not amazing. But still, it's quite threatening. If it does get to stand up and stay stood up throughout a few turns. It's one of those cards which your opponents is like very wary of, and it doesn't matter on the element either. So you could be in Earth. You will be in Earth and Lightning, but you could have fire summons, you could have water summons, who knows what. So I think it's a fun card to maybe try and mess around with, but ultimately it's just a bit too costly. But I want to try. Blue Mage. So again, pay 1, dull, discard a water card, put Blue Mage in the break zone. Choose a monster of 4 or less in your break zone, play it onto the field. That's really good because it's a 4-cost monster, and again, this could work quite nicely with the Animist, sorry. And then go to combat, pay 2 CP to play onto the field. You may discard a card, and to be honest, you probably don't want to, but the draw here is the fact that you get to keep on having Blue Mage ready for the following turn. So it's like it's pay 1, dull, discard, but not break. So technically, actually, no, I'll rephrase that. It's like it's pay 3, discard a water card, and play it onto the field. So you're paying 5 effectively. But hopefully it means that Blue Mage gets to get played back onto the field, and even though it's discard draw, you have to discard a monster, which you probably don't want to be doing, unless of course it's for the play on the following turn, because you could discard an Ironman to get a draw, and then on the following turn Blue Mage that Ironman back onto the field. So yeah, a bit down the rabbit hole, but you know, that's the reason that it does these sorts of effects, is that you can recur the thing you've discarded. And hopefully Warrior of Light can recur the Blue Mage to recur something else, to play something else. Yeah, a bit weird but fun. Botanist. Right. So a weird card. When Botanist enters the field, you may remove 1 backup without the generic icon you control from the game. When you do so, play 1 backup from your hand onto the field. Its auto ability will not trigger. So realistically, the best card that you could remove from the game would be a 1 CP named backup. Now those are actually fairly few and far between. In fire you've got 2, it's like Morrow and Larkicus. In ice, I don't think you have one. Wind, I don't think has one. The only ones I can remember are those 2 fire ones. There's obviously Princess Sarah. There's Materia. There is Yargarosh, and then there's ultimately Spiritus. Spiritus or Materia are basically the same thing. They enter the field, they give you a crystal, that's fine. And then the following turn, Botanist onto the field to remove Spiritus, and then play a backup onto the field. So yeah, maybe like Lycos, it depends on the elements you're in. Botanist obviously doesn't mean you have to be in wind at all. Warrior of Light could just be mono earth and just Botanist and Spiritus or whatever, things like that. To be honest with you, it doesn't really matter. It's just depending on the fact that the backup has to be non-generic, and hopefully not have cost you too much, because otherwise it's not really worth it then. So that's why I went with Spiritus basically. So things you could play, something like Una. Now obviously Botanist states that its auto ability will not trigger. What that means is that the entry auto ability will not trigger, so you won't get to bounce something with Una. However, you will still have the effects of when a character leaves the field, removed from the game instead of breaking, or yeah, when it would be put into the break zone, removed from the game. So that's a very potent effect. The one problem is that this card is very expensive, and bouncing something isn't always a good thing. So yeah, not amazing. But again, you could be a mono earth and Botanist into Una out of nowhere. What the hell is this? But now things are removed when it dies. So if you followed that up with, say, playing, I don't know, Shadow Lord or something, breaking all your opponent's board and removing it all instead, that's not so bad. Obviously, you could do something similar with the Neo X-Death, but it's expensive. You break some of your backups, and yeah, so it means you don't have to go that far potentially. Chime. So at the end of each of your turns, if you control 5 more backups, draw 1 card. So Chime doesn't care what element you're in, just as long as you have 5 backups. And again, you could be in mono earth. You go to Botanist. So you go from 4 to 5. Yeah, 4 to 5. Sorry. Botanist to remove a backup to then play Chime. You're now at 5. You then get to pass turn and draw a card. So Botanist. The good thing with this is that Botanist becomes your 5th backup, and then Chime enters the field. Doga. So obviously you get to break backups when you cast summons. The real draw here is being able to utilize Botanist so that you're getting yourself 2 backups, but playing a high cost backup with it as well. So something like Doga or Una, which otherwise wouldn't normally get played. So yeah, being an Earth, you're probably going to play lots of summons, and breaking backups would be quite nice, especially with the new Vincent as well. If you're able to keep on doing things like that to break things, that could be quite funny. Leslie. So at the end of each of your turns, you may give control of Leslie to your opponent, and then at the beginning of main phase 1, during each of your turns, choose 2 forwards you control a forward of an element of an earth, break them, and Leslie. So it means that ultimately you can botanist straight into Leslie, pass turn, give Leslie to your opponent, if they can take control of it, obviously. If they have 5 backups, then it doesn't work. But you give control of Leslie to your opponent, and then if they have a forward that isn't earth, you get to break 2 forwards, and Leslie as well, and Leslie obviously comes back to yours. So yeah, just a weird combo, but ultimately Leslie's really hard to play because of the fact that he's 6 CP. So paying only 3 CP from your break zone, so it's then technically 1 CP to a degree for botanist for Leslie to then play Leslie and to break things. That's really good value to break 2 things effectively. Une's effect is fantastic. So she is relatively fairly costed because it's such a broken ability. Being able to bounce any forward to get its effect or what can't I speak today? Being able to re-trigger an auto effect on any forward is broken. So Une has to be fairly costly. So playing 3 CP for botanist to then play Une is really good because Earth has just got some incredible entry effects. It then means you can start re-triggering your, I don't know, Kirin or something stupid like that. But yeah, just breaking or just replaying things from casting summons is really, really good. And actually, I quite like the Opus 15 Rydia, who can free cast summons depending on the amount of counter she has. Would be quite nice with Une as well. Edward, during your opponent's attack phase, when a forward you control is put from the field into the break zone, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand. So, again, a card that you can't really ever rationalize playing because he's so expensive and he's never guaranteed to get his effect off. So don't pay for him. Pay for Botanist, who then plays Edward. Now, again, you have to always take into consideration that even when you're playing Botanist from the break zone, you can it's 2 CP cheaper because it's not a card from your hand. You had to have played the other card that is being removed by Botanist, so that kind of sucks. Which is why I said about Spiritus or Materia or Princess Sarah, because they're 1 CP, so 3 CP because they're a card from hand. But at least Materia or Spiritus get you a crystal that can potentially be utilised somehow, so they have some form of value. So yeah, you're still paying for these cards technically in one way, shape or form. That's why you want to have 1 CP backups that are, getting you some form of value. And that is it, folks. That is my Warrior of Light Opus 23 card combo show. Like I said, there are so many cards that this card combos with. Well, I just couldn't focus on what to go with. So I wanted to talk about some old cards that haven't seen play, or just some new cards I haven't seen play, and how to do some weird cheating things in, and how to play some fun things with like Zack and the Botanist. I think could be really funny, just having Botanist come out of nowhere. The Armorer as well, that could be quite funny in the right circumstances. So yeah, all very situational. Ultimately, Warrior of Light will struggle because he's one of those cards which just doesn't stick around because he gains so much value. It's like your opponent will never let your Robal Akbel or your Durando sit around because you can just kill it pretty quickly and you get so much value out of it. So yeah, but I think Warrior of Light is really, really fun and can do some. It's just got so much variety of the effects it can draw from. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing it. Maybe could put it into ninjas, with the edge, just gain counters, things like that. There's just so many things you can do with it. Anyway, let me know what you guys would do with Warrior Light because the variety out there is just insane. But thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, and I will see you in the next video.